those lessons that I learned, having these process-driven accomplishments and having like a really good understanding of that, even before I started this venture, which was completely out of my nature. Like the idea, the concept, the training, the coming up with movements, that's my zone. The business side, the lawyers, the patenting, that is so out of my norm that it would become frustrating, but I think through the lessons I learned early in life, figure out what is the most important at that time, and you just dive into it and you go. And then you just move on to the next thing, and you just dive into it and go. And before long you look back, the amount of work that you put in, there's honestly nothing like it.
Welcome to the Doing the Work podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Schindler. I am very excited to have our guest on today because he has so much experience in terms of what we love to have this show be about. So Thomas Lower is someone who I've known for a couple years, just kind of loosely interacted with. We have mutual friends. And I saw him make this exciting post recently, which is what we're going to dive into on this show today, this new creation, this new project he's working on. But for our audience, Thomas, if you wouldn't mind just kind of introducing yourself, telling a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, my name is Thomas Lower. I've been involved in strength and conditioning for honestly most of my life, close to 20 years that I really have dove into it, from being certified to coaching weightlifting and all sorts of things. The majority of that was Olympic weightlifting. I competed in Olympic weightlifting for 11 and 12 years on a national level, and that took me all over the country. I got to work with some fantastic coaches, make some really great friends, win the national championship with Texas Barbell, just like some really, really great stuff. And then that led me into, I did a lot of coaching along the way, of course, and coached a team in Texas and coached teams in Wyoming. I started the very first club, USAW club in Wyoming, took the first youth to nationals. That's always, even out of my, I would say, my national credentials and my numbers and things like that, taking that kid group to the first nationals from a really small town in Wyoming and doing fairly well. That always ranks really high as far as that. Yeah, and I do a lot of fabrication, a lot of metal fabrication on the side and things like that. But overall, weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, strength conditioning, owned a CrossFit for a while. That is really my life. That's what I've done all along. Married to my beautiful wife for 12 years, Samantha Lower. We met in weightlifting, and I was a decent weightlifter. She was a really good weightlifter. We have a 16-month-old daughter, and just living up in the mountains. We live up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Probably one of the most beautiful places in the world outside of January and February and those type of months. But yeah, just living it up here, and excited to talk to you about my new venture with the Freebell and kind of. I would honestly consider it the next chapter of my life, from being really athlete focused to really coach focused to now just seeing if, developing a product that I feel will bring a lot to the culture and the world of fitness and strength conditioning that has given a lot to me and a lot to my life. And I hope that I'm providing a product that it's going to help a lot of people out and maybe kind of open people's eyes to maybe a new implement, a new way to move with free weight.
Yeah, let's dive right into the Freebell. And I know that I'll probably be layering in other parts of your story and the why and all that stuff, but that's what caught my eye. I was scrolling my Instagram and I saw on your feed that you created this new product called the Freebell, and it's like nothing I've ever seen before. And I'd love to kind of hear, what's your description of it, or what's your elevator quick description of what the Freebell is?
I always, I describe it, it's being so new, I've really tried to bring it down to being very specific from the make of it, because I've of course been thinking about this almost nonstop for 4 years, right? So I have a really good understanding of this. But it's an offset bilateral, like two sides weight with a rotating handle. And this weight to me brings something to our single arm weight implement that we would see in the sport of weightlifting, right? Like I've always believed that accuracy and coordination and stability are something that is really hard to bring into a fitness program, right? And it's really hard, honestly, it's almost impossible without a coach. And I saw a need, especially during the lockdowns when my gym was shut down, and we sent people home with like a kettlebell and a dumbbell and things like that, and kind of what was happening during these workouts when there wasn't a coach present. And it wasn't, I think people get really, really stuck into having a coach, and they just kind of like listen and move. And I wanted something that gave like some feedback, and then kind of had a requirement of these lifts that I love so much, being like the snatch and clean and jerk, of that coordination, the stability, and the instant feedback. I mean, if anybody has ever done like even a moderate load snatch, I think almost immediately whether you're going to have a successful lift, right? And that's because of the accuracy and the coordination and the stability that's required, along with the technical bar path. And it's very similar to how the Freebell reacts in a lot of the big dynamic movements.
So to me, when I saw the demo video that you made and everything, it kind of looks to me, again, I've never put my hands on this thing, so I can't tell you what it feels like or anything like that, but it kind of looks to me like you found a way to kind of marry a dumbbell to a kettlebell to a barbell. And what makes it unique is the types of, like even with like a dumbbell or a kettlebell, bar path, the way that the implement moves past your body, it looks like to me like you figured out some of the classic problems that we have with those other implements. So tell me a little bit what separates this product from other things.
Yeah, one of the first, I would say like watching my clients' videos and stuff really sprung this, but honestly, and I've moved with kettlebells a lot, and I've moved with dumbbells a lot. And I was at our house working out with I was working out with the same implements that everybody else was during the lockout. And I was doing a kettlebell snatch workout, and for one, I hit my forearm, and I was frustrated. I was like, this is ridiculous. And then I started, to like feel like and this is, and I do want to be clear, this is no downfall on other implements. I think I love kettlebells. I use kettlebells all the time. But the leverage overhead, being that it was shifted back on your wrist, right? So it's putting weight on your wrist, kind of in a weird spot, which is putting on your elbow and on your shoulder. And in the fitness world, like we see that people will typically have shoulder issues because of anterior tightness, anterior overstrength, posterior weakness. And the kettlebell actually requires you to stay anterior, right? Because that weight is posterior on your upper body, like you have to essentially like activate pec minor and your front delts to stabilize that weight, because the weight is shifted posterior on the arm. And I was just like, man, like I want something like, I like the fact of like the complexity of the kettlebell, but I want something that, for one, I can be completely stacked, right? Because that's like such a thing that I've been preaching in weightlifting for so long, is like how to stack your upper body in a snatch and an overhead squat and in a jerk. But would also kind of have that complexity, because the kettlebell does have some complexity to get into like a snatch or clean position. Like there's a learning curve to it, right? Like, and I like things that are difficult, that you have to practice a lot to get good at. So I wanted something that still like had that little bit of complexity, right? I think it does a couple of things. I think for one, it keeps people interested, which is a challenge in fitness period, is like, if it's almost too simple, I think people just get bored really easy. And I'm one of those people, and that's why I was so addicted to weightlifting for so long, because just when you think you have it figured out, like you have nothing figured out, and so I just started to I literally went into my shop and built it. Like I didn't even draw it first. Like coming from a welding background, I was just like, I'm going to build something. And I built it with an offset weight similar to like what a kettlebell was. And then I put a handle, a straight handle, and I put a sleeve on top. And I actually started like training with it and adding weight to it and stuff like this. And at that point I was like, man, like I wasn't even looking for like a product to sell or anything. Like I was just looking for something cool to train because we were all locked in our houses during COVID. And like I was bored. I wanted something different. The kettlebell was frustrating me. So I just went and built something. And that was the first prototype of the Freebell.
I think there's so much to that story of the product. And I tell people, one of the problems I think we have now in modern society is that we don't ever allow ourselves to get bored. We're attached to our phones, we're attached to our computers, and it's such a shame because the garden, the soil of innovation and creativity oftentimes is boredom. That's part of it. It's like I've allowed my brain the time and the space to create for no other reason. And then the other part of what you dealt with is a problem, right? Like you had a problem, and innovation, all the innovation has been, there's this thing that I want to, I want to create something that fixes this problem for me. And so COVID created this perfect opportunity for you to do that, which I think is just so freaking cool. I didn't know that part of the story, but I just think it's awesome. So
I wouldn't have. I probably, who knows what would have happened if I wasn't in lockdown, because I would have been back working 8 to 10 hours a day at the CrossFit and coaching privates and training, and you just kind of do your thing. And I don't think it's that, like, from what I've heard, it's really not that unique. I feel like tens to hundreds of stories like very similar during that lockdown, how people were like all of a sudden like something clicked and they either made a choice to leave a corporate job or start an own business or something like that. So it was a blessing in disguise for us.
Yeah, I said right when the shutdowns happened, I said something beautiful is going to come out of this. This is like kind of horrific, and at first it was kind of scary because we thought like everybody was going to die or so. It was like kind of like this scary thing, and of course that didn't happen. But I did know that something beautiful was going to come out of it, and your Freebell is just one of many, many stories. But so what I'd love to dive into though is, okay, you had this creative process that led you to develop that first prototype, but then it obviously didn't stop there. So once you developed that prototype, like talk me through how the story goes from the prototype to like where you're at now.
Yeah. So after creating that prototype, I honestly, my first thought was like, this has to be somewhere. So I just kind of figured that somebody had probably already made something similar to this. So I started to search and really couldn't find anything, and kind of trained with it for a while. And I had a really close friend. That was a client and really successful in the business world. And I just kind of started talking to him about it. Just like, hey, like I kind of like thought of this thing, and I don't know if there's any validity to it. Like, I don't know if it's something that's already out there. Like, what would you think? And he's always been a guy that has, I just put a lot of trust in.
Yeah.
He has. I have a few men in my life, my original strength coach and a couple other men that like I just put like a lot of trust in, mm-hmm. and I'll just kind of like, they've always been somebody that like, you want to make proud, and you kind of follow their lead in a way. I think all men need those type of people in their lives. And So he put me in touch with a patent lawyer, and he's like, this is the easiest way, dude. Like, have one of these patent lawyers that does this for a business, have them do a search and just, and do like a really deep dive into it. And they'll do an international search, and they'll search everything. They'll search every patent and just see. And so that's what I did. And I went on the patent search and didn't come up with anything close. I mean, there was like a few like an little offset dumbbell, and people had made spinning handles with dumbbells, which I still don't quite understand, but they so I was like, holy cow, like maybe this can be something. And so I started, there was a local mechanical engineer with a machine shop, and I knew that like a crude prototype, like I had to figure out like if I could make something that could actually work outside of just like my gym. So I started to work with a mechanical engineer. At the same time, I started to do patent work, and kind of the patent world was a kind of a trip for me, like, learning about utility and design and everything, and what to differentiate those, and what protects you against certain things. And so I wound up getting 2 different patents on it, kind of like the design of it and the entire piece. And then I got a utility patent, which is a really good patent, which protects like the more like the mechanical part of it, the way the connections are made and things like that. And that's why people really didn't hear about it, because that patent process took a couple years.
Really?
And and it's fairly expensive, and there's multiple times in the back of your head when you're doing stuff like this, you're like, man, I hope this pays off.
Am I crazy? Yeah.
Am I crazy? Yeah. So I went through multiple, I had four different prototypes that I went through total, and went through some huge learning curves, because one of them was like before I had patented the connection, learning about like how things are connected and the amount of machining and like things like that, and how that increases cost like tenfold, was a big learning curve, because you get these certain prototypes, you start to send them out to different manufacturers and stuff, and that's a whole, like the manufacturing in the United States and how I had to actually go overseas is a whole another deal. But I had to learn that the way I designed it and the way I was working with engineers also had to carry over to how you produce and how you manufacture these things, and how you get it to be cost effective so that your consumers could actually afford it, and then you could be like somewhat competitive on the market with other things that might be similar, like our dumbbells and our kettlebells. And even though it's a little more intricate than that, those are still implements that you have to compete with,
right?
Or at least be like somewhere in that world. So I was, a couple things I wanted to do. I wanted to bootstrap it. I didn't want to borrow anything. I wanted it to be 100% mine, which still to this point it is, and I didn't have to borrow a cent from anybody. I did have to go overseas. That was one of the most frustrating parts of this whole process, like by far. I wanted to produce this in America so bad, and I spent 2.5 years trying to get somebody. And most of the foundries and manufacturers would literally laugh me off the phone call.
Really? Why?
What I found was that, for one, foundries had dropped considerably during COVID. It was like, I read an article, it was like somewhere around 33,000 to 3,000.
Wow. U.S.
manufacturing, just everyone started to go overseas, and all U.S. manufacturers wanted was oil and gas contracts and federal contracts. And anybody who's dealt with the federal government or oil and gas know that they write unlimited checks.
Right.
So those guys they could charge whatever they wanted, and they didn't want to mess with a startup. So that was one of the, I would say, the most frustrating parts of the whole deal, was the fact that I like really put in a lot of effort to try to work with. I even wanted to work with somebody like in the region. I wanted to be in like South Dakota, North Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming. I love the Mountain West. I love the people out here. I love the communities out here. And even the few price quotes I got were like so astronomically high that like it just, none of it made sense.
Right.
And that was the point. There was a point in there where I was like, dude, I don't know if I'm even going to do this. Like if this is the price point or whatever, like, I don't know. And then came Peter from Fringe Sport. And I owe that guy so much.
I didn't know he was involved, but I know Peter pretty well, and I didn't know.
Yeah, so I lived in, as you know, I lived in Austin, Texas for a while, and I worked really closely with Atomic Athlete. Those guys
got my shirt on right now, actually.
Yeah. Jake and Todd and Raul and Eli, those guys were there. They were always so great to me, and part of it was cool is they had ties to Jackson Hole also. So Jake and Todd and those guys, they trained out here with Rob Shaw back in the day, and so we kind of have that tie because I was living in Jackson before I went to Texas, before I came back to Jackson.
Right.
There was a kind of stop in between, and so I talked to Jake, and I was like, I wanted to talk to Jake before I talked to Peter, and I knew Peter and I coached Peter. And the main thing I did with Atomic Athlete is I coached the coaches. Like I would go there and I would teach them weightlifting, I think once or twice a week. And we would do a weightlifting session, and then that would help them teach their clients better. Those guys are huge believers in continuing education. Like they, and I had a lot of fun training those guys. And so I talked to Jake and I was like, dude, here's my idea. What do you think about me contacting Peter? And he was like, dude, Peter's a really busy guy, but like, I'll make the connection. I'll talk to Peter. I'll talk to him at the gym. Let him know you'll be contacting him. And made the connection, and I started talking to Peter about it. And in the beginning, it was like maybe a deal where Peter would produce it and do everything, and it kind of like a licensing type deal. And so we'd work, he had set me up with his manufacturer, which is a great connection because they've been just like fantastic. And started to work with them, started to go through the process of building a prototype within their manufacturing that would work with, because our biggest hurdle was the outside needed to be ductile cast iron, and then the innards would be all machined steel. And that was going from a machined steel to everything, which is just like that. You'll never get away with that.
Right.
You know, it was $800 a weight type deal. So I started working with them and everything. And then it came up that Peter had a huge deal. I think a friend of his was having a hard time fulfilling a huge order. And Peter was just like, man, I got to put it on hold real quick. I have to fulfill this order. But you can work with my manufacturer. If you want to work with me later on in quarter 3 or 4, we'll talk, we'll figure that out again. If you just want to work with the manufacturer, I will help you any way possible. So like I said, Peter was
That's awesome.
I don't know what I would be doing without Peter. He really put himself out there. He didn't have to connect me to his manufacturer. He could have stopped right there, honestly. He's like, hey, this is my manufacturer. He could have been like, I'll talk to you in quarter 4. But we had multiple conversations on the phone, and his whole deal was he like genuinely just wanted to do what's best for me. And he said he would help me with business side, whatever. And then that kind of led me to just working one-on-one with that manufacturer, and got me to the point I am now with having full sets, 2 kilos all the way to 24. We got in like a pretty good deal with the manufacturer, and we're kind of like moving forward now to, we have our two sample sets. We have our full sets, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 16, 24 kilo, and we're going to be debuting here in like 3 days at the Summit Games, formerly the Iron Games in Salt Lake City, and we'll be there set up, showing CrossFit athletes, showing strength athletes. There's going to be a strongman competition, and that'll be kind of debuting it.
That's crazy. So they're using your product for some of their events in the
No, not in the CrossFit event. No, so we are using way oversized Freebell for a strongman max hold.
Really?
So yeah, and it'll go from, there's a bunch of different divisions for women's and the weight classes of men's for this event, and it'll go from 50, I think it's like 53 pounds all the way to 120 pound Freebell that they'll do a minute hold and then max reps for extra points for tiebreakers.
So did your manufacturer just do like a one-off 100?
No, we got that built. We just built a one-off at a machine shop.
Oh,
here.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, because of the fact that like every weight that you do for the manufacturing, you have to you pay to build the molds and everything.
Yeah.
It just made more sense, and then we built one that you just add on plates.
Okay.
Which is kind of similar to my third prototype. We when we were testing it, we just built it to where it had an inner plate, and then we would add additional plates just to test, because one of the big deals was the mechanics of the weight. Like, you want it to be slightly unstable but still control.
Right.
So where the handle is located within the weight, how much weight's distributed. I think just the eye test, people would be like, oh, you just kind of shaped it like that and put the handle there. I had engineers do math on every single weight to figure out, so they actually have the same exact rotation all the way from 2 kilo to 24.
Wow. So working with the manufacturer, did you have to make a huge order to get started, or where are you at in that mass manufacturing kind of process, and where's this going? Hold on, my dog is crying. Cut it out. So yeah, where are you at in that manufacturing process?
So I ordered 2 sets and I air freighted them here, which I wouldn't recommend air freighting from overseas for anybody.
Yeah.
But I needed them to get here. I couldn't wait 2 months. The cost of waiting and not having them for this event to me was just too high. So we made the choice to just get them here as fast as possible. We'll debut them this weekend. We'll probably spend the next 15 days. So there's 1 set here, and then there's 1 set at Bishop Barbell. So Bishop Barbell is the next I would say storyline, because they are doing all of my shipping and distribution. So Bishop Barbell, they're sort of regional, but they produce bumper plates, kettlebells, racks, rigs, everything. They're a huge supporter for the CrossFit community around here.
Okay,
and
cool.
For the strongman community. So they're actually supplying all the equipment for the Summit Games, and so that was my next big step, was how am I going to ship and distribute all that? And so Curtis Bishop with Bishop Barbell, they were, we've made a deal to actually team up, and he was super jacked about it. I actually was in a powerlifting meet 2-3 years ago at his gym and had told him about this. And when I finally got my final prototype, I brought him the prototype, and I'm like, here it is, it's done. And he was juiced about it. And so there's actually a full set at his gym, which is Empire Strength and Fitness in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And then a full set, this one behind me, that's that full set. We'll test those just to make sure. I've tested a few of the weights, but I wanted to test every single weight, see if I need to make any small changes. And then I think between October 15th and October 25th, I'll be ordering my first shipment, which I'm pairing up with Curtis. We're gonna fill a whole container, partially with some weights that he's gonna sell, and then my weights. And I'll probably start with around 200 of every. It's 100 minimum for almost any of those manufacturers overseas. I'm gonna go 200 of every weight, and we built custom racks for it and everything for people ordering the full sets. So our hope is somewhere around the first of the year that we will be ready to ship them, but we will start pre-selling around the 1st of November.
That's crazy how that came from all the way to from an idea to some prototypes to, what I mean? It's just step by step. There's several things you mentioned in your story that I want to dive into. The first of which, though, you had plenty of opportunities to quit. You had plenty of good reasons where no one would have faulted you from saying, you know what, this is too much work, or it's too expensive, or there's a lot, right? Why didn't you?
I would say two things. I come from, I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, and I went through like with sports and stuff. A lot of even like my closest friends and family don't like understand. Like I had a lot of like really serious head trauma when I was really young that I had to work through, and welding and fabrication was a big one for that, and the weight room was another one from that. And I always, I work with kids now, and I try to get across to them, that what like the weight room and training and things like that can teach you overall. And one of the big things is like, just like the process for the Freebell was, there's no replacement for just time. It's just like the time you put in will always correlate in a positive nature with everything. But the weight room is so nice because it's such a tangible thing. It's like you can just see it. Like I saw myself from when I snatched 95 kilos to when I snatched 152 kilos. Like, and that was so many years in between. So I think that has always like ingrained in me that this delayed award thing, it's just like how much more meaningful that is when you see the years that you've put in work. And I would say the other thing is, like, I grew up with my dad rebuilding classic cars and doing hot rods, and I build rock crawlers and stuff like that now. And the time you put into those, the years where you feel like you're doing nothing, sometimes where you step away for months at a time.
Yeah.
You just want to sell, but you're just like, no, you stick to it. When those types of things are finished, or when you start the engine for the first time, or you go for a cruise or whatever, that feeling is so similar to even hitting a big weight in competition. And I think like those lessons that I learned, and having these process-driven accomplishments that didn't take months, they took years and years and years, and having like a really good understanding of that even before I started this venture, which was completely out of my nature. Like the concept thing, like the idea, the concept, the training, the coming up with movements, like that's my zone. Like I live there. The business side, the lawyers, the patenting, the business plan stuff, that is so out of my norm that it would become frustrating. But I think through the lessons I learned, early in life, through all of these different things that I've done, just helped me to have like a really good understanding of the process, and how you just figure out what is most important at that time, and you just dive into it and you go, and then you just move on to the next thing, and you just dive into it and you go. And before long, you look back at the amount of work that you put in, and there's honestly nothing like it. And I think that's something missing for a lot of people, is that feeling. Like I wish everyone could have that feeling of the type of sacrifice and work and stress and everything that goes into it, and can look back and be like, man, like I killed that.
Yeah.
Like I could have quit, but I kept driving, and it all worked out.
Yeah, and I think I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's like, I tell people all the time, like I'm a gym owner who like actually doesn't care that much about like how much weight people lift or like how fast they run. It's because what you just said, right? I'm a massive believer that what it takes to be successful at anything in life can be learned in the gym just through sets and reps. Like you said, time under tension, persistence. It's the one thing that is going to lead to any success in your life. And it's in the gym, it's just like a really nice, easy, kind of safe place to experience that. But I always think it's such a shame when everybody makes their, their strength and conditioning training just about how they look or like just about how strong they are, and they're missing the opportunity to do exactly what you've done, right? Let me apply this to something else that's also going to bring me some results and an outcome that I really want. So I just think that's super cool, and your story of persistence is really inspiring, I think, because too many people, in fact, the majority of people have great ideas and the skill to bring those into the world, and we never see or hear about these ideas because what they are missing is the toughness, the ability to deal with adversity, adversity, and see something through. So I'm so grateful that I'm even talking to you right now because you actually did, you have, or at least you're in the process of seeing this all the way through.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, like I get it. Like we were talking before the show, like I have, I would say that I looked at equipment manufacturers and I looked at guys that built different things, and I always knew it was challenging, but I had no idea. um, and I have a lot of respect for anybody who dives into being an entrepreneur and trying something completely different. One of the challenges of something like this when I was going through that process was like the fact that I had to keep it secret, because I think, people look to their peers. I had a few people that I could trust, but, I think when people have an idea or something like that, like their first instinct is like they want to go to friends and they want to get feedback, right? And then like that positive feedback will kind of feed you a little bit and give you some motivation to keep pushing forward. Here I was going through this patent process and hearing all these horror stories about things getting stolen in the fitness world. So I had to keep it like very, very locked up. So you're just kind of in your head, thinking about like, is this a good idea? Like, how would this work? Or like, what type of population, am I gonna like? Would this help? Like, what different is this gonna be more rehabilitation, prehab? Is this a dynamic movement for general population? You have all these things that you're kind of trying to figure out on your own, and that was tough because of the fact that you have a little bit of anxiety about the fact that you have this, and it's like you start to do the process of kind of protecting it a little bit, and really didn't have I would say like no, I wouldn't say support. Like I could have had it if I wanted to, but I couldn't really even build that support behind the product until much later. And it's been really fun to hear some of the feedback from people I really respect, about like what they how they see the product going and how they're excited about it. And that's been like a really nice thing after all those years of kind of having to keep it to myself.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I also think in some ways, you'll hear some people say quotes like, I'm going to paraphrase this, but like, set big goals, don't tell anyone about them, and just go out there and do the work, right? You'll hear things like that. And I'm not always an advocate of that, if I'm being honest. But I think there's benefits to that, right? Like, because some of those people you trust and you care about and who care about you to protect you might have said, oh, Thomas, I don't know, like all these bad things could happen. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. And they could have talked you out of it, so there's probably some benefit, not because they don't love you and not because they don't want to see you win in a big way, but they maybe want to save you from potential pain, right? So I think that's kind of a cool part of your story. Like maybe that patent process kind of like helped you to be persistent because you didn't have anyone in your ear trying to talk you out of it,
And the few people I had were really local. And it's like, that's an interesting point because, I came from small town Nebraska. My dad was a railroader, which, and I think like the mindset in a smaller town is just different. It's like you get your 9 to 5 and there's nothing wrong with it because it gave me a really great life and a really great childhood. both just working class parents in a small town. But I always knew that I needed to do something different. You know, I right out of high school, I got hired at the Union Pacific, and not long after, I was fired for insubordination. And I knew right then that I wasn't going to be a corporate guy. Like, that just wasn't in my DNA. And but I think still growing up in a small town, you still have that mindset, right? You're still like that. I have to grind, I have to save, put it back, like, just be safe, don't know what the world's going to do or whatever. And a huge benefit to living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming is I am surrounded by the most successful of successful people, not just in the country, but in the world. And they don't blink an eye when you talk to them about launching a business or doing a startup or investing or whatever. They're like, yeah, do it. Like, this is what you have to do. And that's the other thing. I don't know if I would have ever done it if I didn't live in this area. Because the few people that I had talked to, like the really close friend of mine, a guy named John Robinson, he was like, right off the bat, like, do it. Like, you got to do this. And because honestly, the people around here, they just think differently.
Yeah.
Like, these are, you know, they're successful. They invest their money in crazy places. They do all these startups. They kind of, I mean, they treat it almost like a game.
Yeah.
You know, they gamble with almost everything. And that's why they're at the place they're at. It's because of that. And both Samantha and I have met a lot of people around here that have been ultra supportive in, like, you just got to do this. Like, don't go small, just dive in, go big. And through that process, I think it totally changed my mindset on this. And it was just like, because having a 16-month-old, like, it could be really easy to be like, to start look at, you know, lawyer bills or whatever. You know, like, people don't understand, like, when you're like starting a business with a manufacturer, it's like they have to write contracts for me. You know, they're writing contracts for manufacturing, contracts for shipping and distribution, contracts for disclaimers that are going to go in there, trademarks, patents, like, all of this. And it could be really easy to be like, man, like, this, I just can't risk this with my daughter at home. Like, this is just crazy. I gotta just save this. You know, I gotta put it in a 401k, gotta start saving for college or whatever. It could be really easy to do that. It could be really easy to do that right now.
Yeah.
But those people, and then number one, my wife, was just like, at this point, she wouldn't even let me quit. Like, she was always, because she's the one that hears me at home when I'm like, gosh, like, what am I doing? Is this like, because everybody has those moments, no matter how motivated or like entrepreneurial or whatever you are, I think everybody has those moments. And she's like, I don't care. She's like, I don't care if we ever see another, like, a cent out of this. I don't care if any of that money comes back, all of this will be worth it. And like, so I don't know what I would do without her in my corner, just being like, you got this.
Yeah.
Like, whatever we want to do to do it, like, we'll just make it happen. It doesn't even matter. You know, it's just money. This is like your dream. She believed in this. She always thought that it would be successful. And so I feel like with her, with the people in this community that just have that mindset, it totally changed even my mindset from being like a small town kid, like the 9-to-5 type of guy, to a much more of like an entrepreneurial, risk-taking venture. And it's been a challenge the whole time. Like, it almost feels a little unnatural at times, but you know, it's just like every time you get into one of those places that feels a little uncomfortable, a little unnatural, I feel like you start to grow, you know. And it's, you know, they say, like, the smaller your world is, the bigger your problems. So like, when you start to like branch out of this, just like, I got my small, like, I'm in my box, right? Or I got my clients or whatever, and I go and I hit my clients and I go home and I write my program and boom, and then like all these little things seem like huge, right? Like every little thing, like, you know, like men can be like really, really reactive, like react. When we start to get out there and it's like all of these things and you're like, your world starts to expand and you're doing like overseas manufacturing and you're working with all these people. It's like the little stuff, you're just like, whatever, you know, like you just kind of like, you brush it off. And it's been great from like a growth standpoint for me personally too.
Yeah. And man, it's just like your story right now, the more you tell the story, none of this I knew before we got on this call. Like I'm hearing it as everyone else is hearing it right now. And it's like the perfect example of like what I want for everybody, right? Like I want people to have, you mentioned, you know, a sense of purpose, you know, something that they're like bigger than themselves that they're working towards, to have like these optimized habits, like you've shown, the things that kind of like the daily in and out things that you do every day to kind of bring this all to the world, the meaningful community, the relationships that you had, even though you couldn't tell everyone about it, you had meaningful relationships. The people who were close to you, who you trusted, they trusted you, and like you said, you are the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with, you know, for better or worse. And that really is a part of this story. And then the big part of it is self-actualization, right? Like the process of stretching and growing yourself to just find out what is my fully expressed, free, like most unchained version of myself like look like. And it might not, I mean, like, let's not like also like this Freebell endeavor that you're doing right now is amazing, but it might not be the end all be all. You might move on to something else, or you might shift gears at something else. But no matter what, it's always going to be a part of your story that helped you to grow and be free and creative and unchained. And it's just like such a cool, amazing story to sit here and listen to, man.
Yeah, and it's been, you know, and like you talked about, like the process of like the whole process of this, like no matter where that ends up, I think about that all the time. I mean, the things that I've learned, the connections that I've made with people, that's been great. But my focus of this the whole time, like I wanted to make something cool. Like I wanted to make something that like people would enjoy, and I wanted to make something that was totally different.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to just like take something that was a fixed weight and make it a loadable weight. Like, you know, I wanted it to be like something that, you know, like I've talked to a few people recently about like one of the parts I'm most excited about is like seeing the creativity of, I see it all the time with like kettlebells and dumbbells and, you know, people that, you know, what they'll do with movements, whether it's like the Marcus Feelys of the world or whatever. Like, I think that's so cool, you know, coming from a guy who, you know, I can't really do Olympic weightlifting like I used to. Like, I think everybody's body like has, you know, kind of has their limit, and I can't lift, you know, like the big barbell stuff like I used to. And that's where like the single arm stuff and these different implements have become such a big part of the way I train. And I see it all the time, like with guys my age that are late 30s, early 40s that are getting to that point. And I can't wait to see how some of these guys hopefully use it. Like I want people to just like take this design, take the way I see it, the way it functions for me, and the type of movements and flow that I do with it, and then just like completely take their creativity and take it for however they want to use it.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that for years, about like, man, like if it gets in the hands of some of these guys, like I've seen some of these guys, the way they move with kettlebells and dumbbells, and I can't wait to see the way they move with the Freebell.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool. I can't wait to see it either. Just like knowing a little bit of your story and getting to catch it at this point of the story, you're 100% right. I'm in the middle of reading the book, Rick Rubin, the creative act or a creative act, and he talks a lot about this, right? Like the process of being creative, and I don't actually consider myself a super creative person, so I have so much admiration for people who are artists and designers and like you know, fabricators and all these people who just make things with their hands and their minds. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah. So as we're bringing this to a close, tell people out there who like how they can find the free. You know, what's next for the Freebell? How can they support? They're going to hear this story and they're going to want to support you. So like, what is, you know, how can they help you out? Where can they learn more about your product? All that good stuff.
The freebell.com, and the Freebell is pretty much everywhere, like at the Freebell. Most of our stuff will be Instagram. There's an email sign up on the freebell.com that people can sign up, and that'll kind of give you, that'll start once we get a newsletter going and give you updates on like when the first order goes. First thing that we'll be putting up is just like some swag, and that'll go along with our launch and along with our initial orders, which there will be like a discount for our initial launch and the pre-orders. And then we'll be running a contest where we'll be selling a bunch of apparel, and that'll enter you for a contest to win. We'll give like 3 prizes. We'll give like a full set away, and then like a pair and like a single type of deal, to where we can get some of these out to some people and get some movement. And you know, one of the things that our big focus is education. You know, being a coach, you know, I worked for USAW. I taught my own seminars. I created like my own style of coaching Olympic lifts, and that was like a great venture for me on my seminars. I really enjoyed that. I worked for CrossFit weightlifting for a little while. So like education is like really important to me. It's a passion of mine, and I think with the product that's so new and it's going to move a little bit differently than people are used to. I want really high quality education out there. So we're starting the Freebell Academy, which will be an online training source. We'll be doing a bunch of stuff through the Freebell Academy Instagram. Just as simple as like the concept around the way you move with a Freebell is similar to an Olympic lift, but a lot of people don't do like even the Olympic lifts. I feel like people really don't grasp the concept of it very well.
Yeah.
You know, it's really complex. It takes years and years to do. The Freebell has a much shorter learning curve, but I mean, something as simple as like a snatch, right? Like I want to get out like education for everyone on like how to properly do this, because you know, one of the big components of the Freebell is because of the offset weights, because of the spinning handle, you're able to create a much straighter weight path than you would with a typical weight, because you can have a delayed turnover. Like in weightlifting, right? Like they always say elbows high, bar close, lift the shirt, right? And then we can turn over really late. And you can do that because you have a spinning bar, right? If you are actually having to rotate the weight, you have to start your turnover earlier, which kicks the bar away from the body, which puts you in a vulnerable situation, right? And that's the way, even though it's not much, with a heavy dumbbell, you still have to turn the weight over. And with a kettlebell, you have to rotate the weight. When a Freebell snatch, the weight needs to stay static. You're trying to keep it still if you can, and then you're turning it over late, right, with the handle and stabilizing it. And so you're not actually having to move the weight. Now, if the weight moves, that feedback, that is what will tell you what happened, right?
Right.
Like if it gets away from my body and I turn into more of like a round curve for my bar path, that weight will be moving when you're in the overhead position. So it's giving you instant feedback on your actual bar path. It's also giving you what kettlebells and dumbbells don't do, and it's feedback on the coordination of the catch, right? So the timing of a catch. We see it all the time with like a dumbbell snatch, to where they pull it, and it's almost like it's about to pull their shoulder up top. They just pull it as hard as possible, right? You can't do that with a barbell either, right? Because it'll screw the timing up so much of it. That's what we talk so much about, timing your lockout with when your feet hit the ground, right? And the actual deceleration, which is just as important as acceleration on any movement. It's how you decelerate. Well, the Freebell really forces you to time, right? So when I receive a Freebell, like I can't just pull it to the sky and hope for the best, right? Like I actually have to coordinate the movement. I have to control my power output, and I have to control the timing of my catch. And if all that is correct, then that weight is going to stay somewhat stable, right? And then it forces me to stabilize the shoulder in the overhead position in a stacked position, which is probably the most important part, right? So instead of having to force my shoulder forward, or instead of having just a fixed implement where there really is no feedback, even if the dumbbell or whatever goes clear away from your body, this forces that feedback, and it forces you to slow down a little bit. It forces you to concentrate, and probably the most important which in my mind is one of the most important concepts in the future of fitness, is we have to find ways to raise intensity without just raising weight, right? Because that infinite raise of intensity with weight will only get you injured. It will only burn you out.
Yeah.
Right? There's different ways to raise intensity, right? Like, and one of those is having a really complex movement that has a little bit of instability that forces that coordination, that concentration, and accuracy during the entire lift.
I think it's, I'm sitting here while you were talking about it. Do you think there's an application? So we are unilateral beings, right? Like by nature, when you're just being a functional human, most of the time we're unilateral, right? And that's what I kind of love about the Freebell is it forces that. But I'm also wondering from a training perspective for folks who do bilateral type. You know, you think about Olympic weightlifters, right? It's all bilateral for the most part. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, do you think that there are going to be some high level, like you and your wife are high level Olympic weightlifters? You've competed at a national level. Would this be something that you would use to help get better at the bar? Do you think that there's an application there? You know, in the sport.
Yeah, 100%. Looking back at my career, there's multiple, like, I think everybody looks back and like, man, if I would have done this.
Yeah.
And I think accessory work is downplayed a lot in Olympic weightlifting. And, but so like, they would look at this type of accessory work and be like, oh, you don't need that. You need to be on a barbell. But really anything outside of the snatch and clean and jerk is accessory work. That's just what it is. And so I think replacing some of those things like heavy push presses and things like that with a single arm, especially like I'm a big proponent now because I've been working on my hips forever because of the fact that in Olympic weightlifting we split jerk one side forever. Working that opposing split position with the press, I think that those positions are huge. We do one thing that you can do with the Freebell that you can't do with other things is you can do a Zercher position. And we do a ton of Zercher stuff. So because of the fact that it's high enough that you can actually get your arm under, it sets in the forearm, so you can do Zercher. But I always tell people it's like the fact that when you do a barbell curl, it puts a lot of stress on a lot of people's elbows, right? That's why you do a dumbbell curl. It's the same thing with the Zercher. The Zercher kind of puts you in a goofy position sometimes, whether it's where the bar is or where it puts your shoulders or elbows. So I can either do single arm Zercher or double arm Zercher. And those types of things, as far as like having that weight high anterior, but not stressing my shoulders and lats like I would in a front rack position, which is always an issue for Olympic weightlifters, but still having to be able to do the weight in the anterior position and be able to do like your single leg hinging and things like that. I think that stuff is huge. I mean, even doing, with the 24s, doing like 24s in each arms for Zerchers for, the single leg, like a kickstand RDL type position. I mean, that stuff is just like, would be so great for not only the strength, but like the recovery piece.
Injury prevention, a lot of that.
And that's a big part of what we're doing. We had, there was Dr. Edege was in the gym a couple years ago. He was here for a golf tournament, and he's the orthopedic surgeon that worked on Aaron Rodgers' Achilles and like Connor's leg and stuff. And he looked at the weights and he was like, I want them in my clinic. And that's when I started working with a girl named Caitlin, who is the PT for the U.S. ski team in town. And she's been using it with her physical therapy clients for, gosh, over a year now, probably. Anything from like ACL recovery, because you can change the angle of the Freebell, right? Like, so if you have it forward and you're doing like a single leg RDL on a blue mat, like a soft mat, and you're working on stability, you can actually change the angle of the Freebell to work. Like if I want to work on lateral stability, then I would keep that like in a neutral position, right? And as they would start to become unstable lateral on that foot, the weight would actually start to move, right? So she can see it. She's getting feedback. The athlete's also getting feedback, and she's able to keep same idea. She's able to keep a lighter weight, get a lot of really high quality work. She does it with a lot of shoulder recovery and things like that. So, like you said, like injury prevention, prehab, rehab, we're seeing more so than I even thought when I invented it. It's becoming, I think it's going to be a big piece within like the physical therapy world.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun for you, like you mentioned earlier. Some really smart, creative people are going to take something that you were really smart enough to invent, and they're going to do some stuff with it that you never thought about. That's just going to be super fun, for you to watch. So I think that's going to be a cool part of the story. Well, I want to honor your time and not keep you on here too. I could talk about this stuff all day, but I want to remind everybody, go find Freebell Academy and Freebell on their website and on Instagram. Definitely I put a story up as soon as I saw your thing, and I said, if you want to support anyone who's chasing their dream, Thomas Lower is one of those people. I mean, you're going to listen to this episode and just see what a great guy you are and how hardworking you are, and you are someone that we want to see win. So just thank you for how you're showing up in the world. Thank you for creating this product, for letting us witness it, and you're an inspiration, man, and just thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I mean, it's the fitness, strength conditioning world has given me my life. So I want to give back in any way possible. I've always wanted to, whether that's just my clients and training young kids and hopefully, helping them change the trajectory of their lives with whether that's just like the sports they play or the fitness. And hopefully this can be similar to where we can get out there and, of course, like, we'd love to see like the athletes and everything use this. That's always fun, but we want people just to train, period. We know how important it is. We know how important fitness and exercise is for mental health, for the obesity epidemic and everything. And it's always been a passion of ours to help in any way possible. And we hope that the Freebell can be at least a small piece and getting people active, getting people healthy, getting people happy.
Well, you are definitely doing that. You're meeting that purpose, and you're doing it in new and creative ways, even though you were doing it in traditional ways already, and now this is just an added layer to that, man. So, congratulations, and thanks for being on the show, man.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.